to the entertaining Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I'm going to put my Dave Gettleman cap on yet again. And I'm going to look at the New York Giants roster. And I'm going to tell you which players, if I was the general manager, for the right price, I would potentially look to trade. Now, I'm not saying that I would just trade them to trade them. I'm not desperate here. I'm not trading these guys for nothing. Now, some of the players that you would look on the roster and you would say, oh, trade that guy, trade this guy. Yeah, Nate Solder would be great if we could trade him. Nobody's going to take a left tackle who's underperformed at the rate that he has that's due to make $39 million over the next 2 years. The Giants are going to have to bite the bullet with him. He will play this year, in my opinion, being that he would only save you $6 million and you'd have to eat 13. Next year, he cuts into the cap by 6 and you'd save 13. So next year is the year where the Giants may look to cut Solder. But this year, he will be on the roster and nobody will be taking him. The same can be said for Alec Ogletree. Alec Ogletree is a mediocre linebacker who makes, I think, $11 or $12 million a year. Nobody's taking that on. I expect the Giants to cut him, but I don't expect us to be compensated with any draft picks or anything in terms of a trade. There's a couple of players that are on the New York Giants roster that I would potentially look to trade if the deal is right. Now, the way a trade works is you look to trade players either at positions where you have a lot of talent, so they're replaceable on your roster and you could accumulate draft picks, or you trade a player that you don't think will be with your team long term and you try to get value while you can get it. Well, when I look on this roster, their deepest position right now, in my opinion, is the defensive line. It's specifically the interior defensive line. And if the New York Giants plan to bring back Leonard Williams, which by all accounts they do, and the more and more I look into this, the more and more I think it might not be the wisest decision to bring back Leonard Williams. It might be smarter to cut your losses. When you look at the Giants' interior defensive line, they have some pretty good talent there. They spent the 17th overall pick on Dexter Lawrence. They have Dalvin Tomlinson, of course, who was actually a good pick by Jerry Reese, who is one of our more talented players on the defense and overall on the roster. You have B.J. Hill, who showed some signs early on in his rookie year, and R.J. McIntosh has been pretty solid throughout his time with the New York Giants when given an opportunity, and they spent a fifth-round pick on him. So the Giants certainly have some depth, and they have some talent on that defensive line. But if they bring back Leonard Williams, which most people expect them to do, if I was going to make a trade, that would be the first spot I would look at. The other spot I would look at, which I've been very outspoken about, is the tight end Evan Ingram. And some people might not agree with that, but Evan Ingram has been injury-riddled throughout his entire career. He will be a free agent next year unless the New York Giants decide to extend him before the season starts, which I don't expect them to do. Caden Smith has shown that he's a pretty good tight end, and you could always draft a tight end later in the draft for depth and, to further cement that position. Now, you're taking a weapon away from Daniel Jones if you do that. I fully recognize letting Evan Ingram play out this year, and if he has a great year, I guess you could get compensated. And you could get compensated for either one of these players that I'm going to mention. And if the trade does not, equal more than what I would get in terms of a comp pick, I'm not making the trade. But the two most obvious players to me that I would look to trade, if the price is right, I want to reiterate that, I'm not trading them to trade them, is Dalvin Tomlinson and Evan Ingram. The reason Dalvin Tomlinson, one, simple. He's coming up on a contract next year, and if you're not going to extend him, you should look to get what you can while the getting is good. Now, if you can't get a late second-round pick for him, I'm not trading him because I'm probably going to be compensated a back end of the third round next year, which is what he would get as a comp pick, in my opinion, unless, of course, you offset that by spending a lot in free agency, which certainly could be the case. The Giants could spend in free agency, and they might not be compensated for that, which is why they might look to make the move now, which is why when people say spend, you also got to look at players that are on the current roster who are coming up on free agency. You're also going to look to potentially extend Saquon Barkley. But when you look at the roster at the D tackle position, you have B.J. Hill under control for an extra year. He's also not going to cost as much as Dalvin Tomlinson right now, and he has potential. R.J. McIntosh, the same can be said. You're paying him pennies on the dollar. And if you're going to bring in Leonard Williams and keep him here and give him a $12 million a year contract, even if you got him for 10, to keep Dalvin Tomlinson, he's going to cost you at least that. And I'm going to show you the chart in a second. But are you really going to pay $20 million a year? And that is best case scenario. You could easily be paying closer to 30 between the two players, but we'll say 20 between two defensive tackles. I don't see it. I don't think it's wise. You'd be spending 10% of your cap on 2 defensive tackles, and I don't see the New York Giants doing that, which is why if they plan to bring Leonard Williams back, it makes a ton of sense to look to trade one of these DTs, and the DT who would get you the most value, who's coming up on free agency at, quickest out of everybody on the roster, is Dalvin Tomlinson. BJ Hill's not going to get you much. He regressed this year by all accounts. RJ McIntosh ain't getting you anything. He's barely played. Leonard Williams you'd be signing, and Dexter Lawrence you're not trading. He's the best rookie from last year's class, which leaves you with Dalvin Tomlinson if you're bringing Leonard Williams back. As far as the tight end goes, I don't see the Giants extending Evan Ingram before the year starts on that 5th year of the rookie deal because of all the injury problems, and they'd have to pay him a pretty penny. I could be wrong, and if they elect to do that, they elect to do that. But if they don't, it would be smarter, in my opinion, to look for a trade if the deal is right. Also, when you look in this year's draft class, the tight end position is incredibly slim. It is slim pickings. It's one of the worst tight end draft classes in years. So if a team needs a tight end, Evan Ingram could be a very good option for them. And if the Giants aren't going to keep him, these are the types of things you decide to do before you let him leave and you don't get anything. Because, yes, you could potentially get a compensation pick, but if you offset that by spending in free agency, you get nothing. That's the way it works. But let's jump into Dalvin Tomlinson and let's jump into Evan Ingram. First thing I wanted to show you was Dalvin Tomlinson's contract. And, yeah, there you go. He is an unrestricted free agent next year. So, if they do not extend him, which I think is going to cost right around this. I think this is a fair estimate. I looked at the DTs, and you could definitely argue it could be more than this because the market goes up every year. Damon Snacks Harrison was signed in 2016. You're talking 4 years in the future next year in terms of the free agency market. But we are lowballing this, in my opinion. Dalvin Tomlinson is coming off a year where he graded at 78 on PFF. In my opinion, was the best player in the New York Giants defense week in and week out. He's going to look to get paid, and I think $10 to $11 million is the basement for what he's going to be looking for, especially if he performs at the level he did last year. Linval Joseph, another former New York Giant who signed that contract a few years ago, is making $13 million a year. So Dalvin Tomlinson, if he performs the way he did the last couple of years, is going to cost you between $11 and $15 million a year, in my opinion. I think you're looking at the same range that Leonard Williams is going to cost you. And if you're going to sign Leonard Williams, are you really going to pay that much? As much as I love him, are you really going to pay that much between 2 defensive tackles on your roster? You're talking probably at least $25 million between the two, if we're being fair, and honest with ourselves. And $25 million is like 13% of the cap on 2 DTs when you have a running back at Saquon Barkley coming up that you're going to have to pay. You have Daniel Jones that you're going to have to pay eventually, and you're going to want to bring in some free agencies along the way, especially if you bring in free agency players this year. So I think if the deal is right, I'm looking to deal him this year for draft picks. Now, I got to get a second-round pick because, in my opinion, if I don't spend in free agency, I would be compensated a third. I have to get at least a very early third-round pick if I'm trading Dalvin Tomlinson. And I'd want a back-end second. And the same can be said for Evan Ingram. And here is what I wanted to pull up for Evan Ingram, and here is his contract. Now, he has an extra year of eligibility if the New York Giants decide to extend him this season, but they have to do it before the year starts. And based on his injury history, based on his, he has not been the most consistent player in the world. I don't know if the New York Giants are going to elect to do that. Now, if they decide to do that, they decide to do that, and he'll be on the roster one more year. But you look at what the Titans did. They didn't do it with Jack Conklin. He had injury history, and now Conklin's set to hit the free agency market. And I don't see the New York Giants franchising Evan Ingram next year. I suppose anything is possible, but the way Caden Smith played down the stretch and the way that you could find tight ends late in drafts, George Kittle, the best tight end in the league, was a 5th-round pick. I don't see the New York Giants breaking the bank for Evan Ingram. I could be completely wrong, and I know a lot of people love this guy, and they see the upside. He is a playmaker at the tight end spot, but you could find playmakers, whether it's the wide receiver or the tight end, late in drafts. So I personally would probably look to trade both of these guys. Once again, I want to reiterate, if the price is right. I'm not shopping these guys for under market value. But if I get a second-round pick for either one of these guys at the back end of the second, mid-second-round pick, I'm making the move. Now, I don't know if you're going to be able to get that. But this makes you think, especially with Dalvin Tomlinson, it may be wiser for the New York Giants to cut their losses and not bring Leonard Williams back. Because if you bring Leonard Williams back, you're probably losing Dalvin Tomlinson. And the way I look at it is this: what would I rather have? What would I rather have, Dalvin Tomlinson, or I lose a fourth-round draft pick? Because that's what you're going to lose if you bring back Leonard Williams, and you're paying Leonard Williams the money that Dalvin Tomlinson would be getting. It's a really tough decision, and Dave Gettleman put himself in this spot. At the end of the day, as much as I back Dave Gettleman up, and I like a lot of the things he does, the Leonard Williams trade, in my opinion, was an atrocity, and I think he's going to try to sign him so he doesn't look like a fool. But at this point in time, when you look at what you're probably going to end up losing in Dalvin Tomlinson, if you do it, it might be wise to cut your losses. Otherwise, I think the wiser decision would be to trade Dalvin Tomlinson this year before the season starts for the right price. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.